Awesome. So thanks for joining Atala PRISM breakout room today. As usual, we're going to ask, are there any questions related to Atala PRISM or the Pioneer program before we move on to an education credential schema discussion? No, doesn't look like. Cool. So I don't know if anyone in the room has anything in particular you may want to discuss today, or if you're happy that I go ahead just sharing the education credential schema with the team to get your input in terms of is anything missing? Is anything in particular anyone wants to discuss? Sounds good to me. Okay, cool, fantastic. Okay, so just some background info. So some people on this call would have gone through the original Atala PRISM training, and some people may have gone onto the self-paced Atala PRISM training. And in the training, we talk about trust registries and governance frameworks, and a whole lot more. Hi, Alison.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
It's okay. And so what our team decided to do is to take this theory that we shared with you on the course and to start making this theory practical. So what we did in the last few weeks, in between a whole lot of other stuff, is create an Atala PRISM Pioneer credential governance framework. So this framework just talks about issuing credentials for 3 courses that we now have in the refreshed Atala PRISM training. And what we did was we made the fundamentals course compulsory. So everybody comes in, goes through the basic understanding of SSI and Atala PRISM, and then they can choose whether they want to do the building with the SSI course or whether they want to do the UX course or whether they want to do both of those. But if they haven't completed the fundamentals course, then we will not let them into the other 2 courses. Now, the fundamentals course is about 8 hours of content, so it's not like rocket science. And really what we believe is necessary is to get the basic understanding of what SSI is. We want to get that understanding up because a lot of people think that SSI works exactly like NFTs and cryptocurrencies, but actually there is a difference, right? So we want to make sure that people understand what they're working with, and then they can start brainstorming their use cases and decide which way they want to go. So for these 3 credentials, and I'm just going to share it in the chat because I didn't prepare anything. Oh, wait, I have to find it. So for these 3 credentials, I'm recommending that we have a credential name, which will be like AP 101 or whatever the formal name of the credential is. And then the credential type. So this particular education credential would be a certificate of completion. So it's not necessarily saying that once Anushka goes through the building module, she's competent to be a developer, right? It's really a completion certificate, and competence will have to be figured out in a different way. And then we've got the course name, the course version, because we find that as we improve on Atala PRISM and change the versioning of Atala PRISM, we end up upgrading the course. And I chatted to Pete, and the course version might end up being the same as the version of Atala PRISM code base or SDK that we training in that module. So then you will be able to see this credential and say, well, Atala PRISM is on 1.4.1 and Anushka only got 1.1 credential. So you'll know that there's still a gap in my knowledge. And then we'll have the participant full name and email address, because those come through on the learning management system that we use. However, some people do use aliases, but because we're issuing a certificate, my thinking was that we need to have a participant full name. So if Alison from applies for a job, then at least you can see Alison's name on the credential instead of some funny, alias. And then the last field was date obtained. And that would help you to see how recently the person, got the certification. I don't know whether it may be necessary or not, but those are the few fields that I've put down in the governance framework to say, let this be the credential schema for verifiable credential for Atala PRISM 101 and then 102 and then 103. Is there any feedback?
I think it sounds great. Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. So I've had this conversation about education credentials in a couple of different places. How are you going to define completion? What will be the mechanism for issuing the credential? I don't mean the technical mechanism, although that's a part of it, but what will somebody have to do to complete the course?
Okay, so let's just take 101 as an example. And in the governance framework, I do mention that, people will have to get onto the LMS, go into the module, complete the quizzes, and get at least 80% for the quizzes. But there's like 5 multiple choice questions per section. And I've also stated that you can take the quizzes multiple times. So you should be able to get to 80% quite easily, right? So even if you do not complete all the training content, at least the quizzes give you some of the basics, that you need to know and understand. So those questions and answers should also give you a bit of a good foundation.
That answers the question for me then. So then the certificate is tied to taking each quiz and getting a passing score for taking the quiz and getting a passing score for each module.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Initially, I was like, and the person must spend X number of time in this thing. And then Tony was like, don't complicate it. It's like, I was trying to be an auditor.
Yeah, well, for our PA onboarding course credential, I think that all the PAs are going to have to do is show up. So you're already ahead of where we are.
And I didn't even make it to that. I didn't even show up.
Well, I hope you don't have a credential or we're falling down on the job.
I will see if I can slyly get one. I'll let you know.
Next fun 10. You could get a credential in fun 10.
Yeah. Okay, I look forward to that. Yes, Cody.
Yes. I'm just gonna play like the dumbest person here. All right. I'm just gonna play like the dumb guy in the room and ask Choco, please be quiet. And ask, I'm sorry, he talks when I talk, he thinks he's the one talking. So as far as credentials, right? And you're getting credentials to this Atala PRISM credential. Is this like something like, to say if I was to have a high school or and they wanted to use this, is this something that they can use or what? I'm sorry, I'm just now jumping into this, so I don't fully comprehend exactly what this is.
Love the question. So I love the question. So this is like, yes, if you're going to high school and then after high school, you're looking for a job and you go, here's my high school credentials. Similarly to how you'd give them your high school certificate or report, when you're going for that first job. It would be something similar to that, but we will still be building out the ecosystem, right? We decided to make the initial governance framework really tight, where Atala PRISM is the issuer and Atala PRISM is the verifier, so that we can demonstrate the use of a governance framework and the format of a governance framework. And our next step is to try and implement this governance framework. And then we can start looking at, and I know like Nin and Snaprilia probably, may have bounty opportunities where people can say, yes, I've done the building with Atala PRISM course, and that may help qualify me to take on some bounty project that's related to building with Atala PRISM. So that's how we think it will work. I hope that answers your question.
In some way it does. In some way it does. Yeah, I'm just trying
Don't
to
worry,
fully understand.
when you get your hands on this, it will make lots more sense.
Okay.
Right? Because I also found, like, I kept hearing about these SSI concepts when I started, but the day I had the app in my hand, an identity wallet in my hand, and I could interact with a fake website to test this experience, it made a lot more sense to me. So we'll get you there. Stay with us.
All right. Okay. All right. All right. Good.
Curtis, let's hear your question.
I just had I didn't see in the metadata itself a parameter about the issuer themselves. So will an issuer of a verifiable credential have their own credential that refers to the source, right? So we are the issuer, and this is some static on-chain information that will never change, and potentially a link to a website where you can review, like Allison's question, what are the requirements? What did somebody do or complete to accomplish this credential and obtain this credential? So maybe that can be broken down on the website, and then a link to that website is inside the metadata of the source credential. Is there such a mechanism?
Excellent. So, so the governance framework currently contains a lot of that information, and the governance framework as well as the trust registry will need to be made public, right? So the information will be contained in there. In terms of the issuer's DID being somewhere, the issuer's DID should be in the trust registry, and the whole process of how the link to the trust registry, how that whole process will work in terms of, how does the holder check the trust registry in their process? How does the verifier, how does the issuer do this? That will be the next step in terms of how we solve for this. So that work will still begin. But that's a really good question. Thanks, Curtis. I see there is a request for the link to the governance framework document. There is one more thing I need to update before I can share it publicly. So I will try and get to that tomorrow. And then I'd share the governance framework in the CSSIA Slack group or the Astro Slack group. I'm just trying to think which other platform would everyone be on. Is everyone in the Astro Slack group here? If you don't know what that is, you can just say in the chat and then we'll find another way. What I will do is I'll post the link to the Cardano SSI Alliance Slack group in the chat so that people can sign up to be a member of the Cardano SSI Alliance, and then that will be the place where I share the governance framework. Okay, so Jeremy, that's for your question. Who's next? Allison, you were next.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I wanted to make an attempt to answer what I understood from Quadi's question about how can the credential be used. And this is kind of a plug for a project that I'm working on with Proof Space, which is or rather, than a plug. It's how I see the project I'm working on interconnecting with this credential. So we're working on an onboarding course for proposal assessors so that eventually anyone who wants to be a proposal assessor does the course, they get a DID, and they get a credential that shows they took the onboarding course. And then potentially in the future, that credential could appear next to their anonymous proposer ID. So presumably that their DID, so that you could see something about the proposal assessor without having to know who that person is. So the proposal assessor could retain their anonymity, but start to build up a reputation. So then the beauty of SSI credentials is that if the proposal assessor also had completed the Atala PRISM's courses and had credentials from that, then we could find a way to display those credentials in the information that goes to both the veteran proposal assessors and also the voting community and the proposers for that matter, so that the whole Catalyst community could know something about the proposal assessor's reputation while allowing that person to keep their anonymity. And so that it might be really useful information to know for a proposal assessor who is assessing proposals that are in the Atala PRISM challenge, which everyone better vote for so we get it in the next fund. But so that's anyway one use case that I see for why having an Atala PRISM credential could be useful.
Great example.
Thanks,
great
Alison.
What's the name
Thanks,
of your
Alison.
project?
That helps a lot. Yes,
sorry.
Cuddy, sorry.
I just wanted to know the name of Allison project.
Yeah, thanks. It's PRISM DIDs for CA onboarding, because back when it was funded in Fund 8, they were still CAs before they were PAs. I'll post a link in the chat in just a second, but I'm happy to report that it was funded already and we're working on execution. So I'm not asking for votes at this point, although I'm sure a follow-up proposal is coming. But at this point, I'm looking for participation in what I hope will be a demo of the onboarding course and credential issuance in Fund 10.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Allison.
Thanks, Cuddy and Alison. Ruslan, you next. Are you looking for that mute
Unmute
button,
yourself.
Ruslan?
Thanks. Thanks. So interesting that I have tried to put your credential into our Atala PRISM formal schema, which is now in link which I just sent. No, I can just post this to chat, maybe all schema. And interesting that this trying to apply into real case for us few interesting questions which we maybe can try to, I can say, try to address. At first, one question is, are we all have an access to GitHub, or we need to post a copy into chat? How is better? What is better?
I am sharing the credential on the screen. Can you see it?
One moment. It's you. I
Yes, it's
see.
me.
I think that it was my screen and I tried to copy it.
Okay, so I've
Good.
put up the credential on the screen so that people can see.
First
what you've
interesting
done.
thing that we have did PRISM, and then we should have the name of authority, which will be just the set of the address. it would be good to have some registry which translate did into human reliable things. It is first questions which maybe it is something like what is missing in the big picture of the credentials. The second interesting question, the same with that we have just some ID, which we also just create from something like name. And usually I think we first last and last name, and if we want also what we can see from these things, that properties is not unique and not verified be unique, which means that somebody can register 10 themselves, ask course 10 times, and they have 10 voters or 10 assessments. Yes, so we need to find the way how to prevent this. That's
okay. So that's a very interesting point you make in terms of someone can register as themselves multiple times. And
because email is cheap.
Yeah. And, I was also thinking about the case of people that are sharing email addresses, right? Which is why I put in the full name and the email address. But would you suggest that, like, wouldn't the DID be linked to this credential as a holder, but not be part of the schema? So that's how you would see that it's a credential gone to a unique person.
Oh, it's we have thinking about this, and our current hypothesis that it can be the half of some know your customer procedure. For example, half of passport. No, you didn't know passport, but you know passport and salt. But it means that it would be some procedure where user show you ID and you can see your ID and calculate a half and publish it.
Okay. So I think we wanted to go light in terms of KYC, know your customer. And that is why we just went with like a simple email address and a full name, and not necessarily with a full on, let me check your ID and let me verify who you are. Because I also had a look at the current process that we follow, right? So basically people will email us and say, they'll fill out a form with their email address and name saying, I am interested in the Pioneer program. And then when they get onto the learning management system, it's really their name and email address that gets used and not necessarily passport, ID, etc. Is that something that would need, do we need to do a robust KYC for the Pioneer program?
Maybe we can. Maybe we can solve out KYC by thinking by Pioneer program is something like proof of work. For example, if Pioneer program include some set of tasks which should be done different for different peoples, then it can be like proof of work. It means that some person can't do 10 tasks. It will be too big work for him. And we can assure that if people receive ID, then we need some ID. Receive ID at the beginning of Pioneer program and keep it in the end and execute all tasks, that this can be a proof of work, which is enough for our purpose.
I see. So just have a So in terms of like the proof of work, is that not them going through the training program and completing the quizzes per section so that they can get this credential? Is that sufficient for proof of work? Or does it have to be something more robust that links the actual human being with their ID number to the credential?
No, it is task which only people can do. For example, in the first pioneer program, it was maybe getting some, if you remember, it was some book about ethics.
Okay.
And it was a task about understanding of book about ethics. As I think it was maybe for dropping of robots, but something like this.
Okay. Okay, I got you. So try and have some kind of exercise included in the qualification criteria that can verify that this is a human that we're interacting with.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm just
And
going to
in
make
this
the note.
case, for to set up attributes, we will need to have this ID in attributes.
Where would we need to put the ID?
No, I mean our ID of participant.
Oh.
In attributes. No, it should be just added.
Okay, thanks for that.
So, Ruslan, so would you envision putting this between the participation in the fundamentals and before participation in one of the other classes? Have that sort of merit-based exercise?
I think it should be. I think it can be embedded into courses. Maybe regular task after each chapter.
Mm. Okay. Sorry, I'm just making notes in my.
And so then the outcome of that test or exercise is included in the certificate for that individual.
No, it's answer technically. It's if, for example, we have result yes no, that it's not needed, because if person come to the end, then he can say that all is end. But if if we need to show something the results, then it can be. But I guess that in our case, it should be simplest way. The simplest way is not show, is to have no listening certificate.
It's really more of a screening as the student progresses through the program. This is really what you're envisioning. Or at least that's what I'm understanding.
No, maybe screening, but the main things which we should be that the task should be individual for each student, maybe generated. So that somebody, that it will be hard to receive 10 certificates instead of one.
Okay, I see what you're trying to do. Okay.
I wonder if it would be possible along those lines to change the order of the questions in the multiple choice quiz. So if you rotate the order of the questions and the order of the answers, then you couldn't just create a template that somebody could easily copy, because if you think it's like you know, the
Mhm.
answers to the 5 questions are A, B, C, C, E, but that wouldn't be the right answer the next time. So somebody would have to actually think about it.
No, it's the war. It's the war we have from one side. We have robots which try to answer one questions. From other side, we have people who saying tests. So it's open things. But what robots do bad is the answer on open questions. Usually robots are very good in closed questions, but very bad in open questions, when they need to create some content from scratch.
Allison, I've been working with the content management system, or it's a learning platform design system that gives you that option of when you're designing a multiple choice question, you can randomize it.
And admittedly, my teaching days, I was more worried about students cheating from each other, less about the robots. So I'm hardly an expert in this field.
Okay. Excellent. In terms of the credential schema, Alison, based on the credential you used to issue the proposer training credential, did you have more or less fields than these in your schema? Just gonna
Less.
share the link.
Ma-
You had less?
Much less, because we weren't capturing, because the person had to attend the training live. So we didn't have, we had the name of the credential. I think we had the phone number and we had the ID. We had a randomly generated ID for the credential, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
So
I like that.
Can we go back to the point that Ruslan was making about stuffing, credential stuffing, and the potential for credential stuffing by a bot? Ruslan, what about adding a field to the credential that logs the IP address and the MAC address of the device that the user logs in from? Now, granted, they could use the same IP address, be on the same network, and use a different device, like log in from their desk and then log in from their phone. So it would be a different MAC address. But that might be a way to help reduce, at least using technical telemetry, help reduce this whole problem of double counting or bot abuse. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about.
So I have a question about that, because this is really due to my technical ignorance. Jane, how much would that information compromise the anonymity of the person?
Mm-hmm.
It would be along the lines of know your customer, AML. I mean, there are proxies and there are ways that by using virtual private networks, the ways that people obfuscate their IP address, but and often virtual private networks that are used by individuals will issue a different IP address every time you log in. So it might be different IP addresses. So that's a problem with, I'm just trying to think creatively about how to address this issue of rate limiting, because rate limiting is something that I act like when I am administering a website and I'm configuring the security settings for the website, I rate limit the number of login attempts that I allow before I shut down access to the system. So that's essentially what you're trying to accomplish here with this. You're trying to demonstrate that it's a real person, not a bot that's just running through a dictionary attack. So, I mean, that's how I'm seeing this. And so maybe what we can borrow some of those concepts as we creatively think through the problem of abuse of self-sovereign identities. Yeah, and Esteban is also pointing out that there are tools for randomizing MAC addresses as well. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's
For
definitely, I
that
think,
side,
go.
yeah, for that side, maybe it is overkill because you can't use certificate. It is not money. Maybe we can just think that it is no, that if somebody will have two certificates for two names, it is for two of his names. It is not a problem at all. Maybe we also should think about this.
Yeah, I see your point.
But this is a problem in, for example, in sense when we count voters, for example, as in Alison case.
So I guess this really gets back to the policy decision that Anushka articulated earlier, and that is the decision to back off of AML or know your customer AML. And that, I think, really stems, I think, philosophically to the notion of maintaining anonymity. Is that what was driving that, Anushka? You're thinking on that, or?
So when I thought about this, I thought, like, why would the Atala PRISM team who's issuing this credential want more information than we've put into the schema, right? So we were trying to minimize the amount of information we ask the learner for. And so I tried to keep it to a minimum of what might be needed to let the person take the course and then issue a credential so that the person can say, you know, I did this course, I'd like to do more work in this field. You know, been there, done that, got the t-shirt kind of thing. I did not and then I was, you know, one of the principles I put into the governance framework was simplicity, because I really wanted to keep this initial governance framework really simple to demonstrate the point of this is what it could look like, this is how it could be implemented. Now play with the tools, go through the course, get the credential so that you understand how this is experienced. So I wanted to put as little as possible hurdles in the way of a learner, you know, to have that experience. Because once people start having the experience, it just lets the creative juices flow, because now you're like, I can do this. And every time something happens in your life, you go like, oh, wow, I'll never need to fill out a form like this again. You know, I'll never need to do this again. If only I had SSI. So it really opens up your world in terms of the unlimited number of use cases that this technology could be used for. So it was really trying to encourage more the education side than, you know, closing all the loopholes from the security and, you know, getting heavy with policy side of it.
I understand that design decision. Well, Ruslan also brings this issue up, but my perspective, because I work in security, I'm always looking out for how the system can be abused by a dishonest actor. And
Yes.
Ruslan brings up the point about bots. And we've seen here, particularly in the assessment phase for Fund 9, we've seen evidence of abuse by bots. And so I know there's a big target on everyone's back in the Catalyst community, and the Catalyst community and ADA and all of the artifacts of Cardano, because it's becoming more widely accepted, it's becoming more widely used. And so I just think it's important to think from a design point of view about what kind of vulnerabilities are we opening up if we don't really address these issues during this stage.
And Jane, that's such an interesting point, because my attempt to solve that, and actually to help specifically with the problem of bots and PAs, was to require this onboarding course where somebody would have to show up, quote unquote, in person, but at least live to a Zoom call. But the problem with that is that that helps from the security side, but of course there are all these other trade-offs around, well, how does that scale to hundreds, if not thousands of proposers? Does it discriminate against people who don't want to learn from a Zoom call? They want to read the material on their own time. And then you get into, well, then you have to have a curriculum where somebody could get their credential in some other way. And then who's responsible for writing the test and determining what's a passing score if participation in a live Zoom call is not the criteria. And so that's, and all of these are really good questions and things to think about. And that's why I was so interested in what the criteria was for getting the Atala PRISM credential.
Yeah, I kind of deflected the conversation here, and I didn't mean to do that, but it is something I just wanted to plant the seed. And it looks like Allison has really been dealing with this issue, the implementation implications around this issue for quite some time.
Well,
Yeah.
I've been talking to people about it. I think that's
Yeah. And there's the other issue of time zones when we're working
yes,
across so many different
exactly.
time zones.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Thanks for the conversation, Jane. I mean, it's I've made some notes, definitely some good points that we need to think about. And thanks, Ruslan. I've also taken your comment down as something that we need to think about. I see that we have a question in the chat from Masai, who says, for the schema, would it be possible to incorporate an images file, or would the size be too big for the DID? So I'm going to pick on Esteban to answer this, as Esteban is more technical than I am.
Can you repeat the question? I was
So
distracted.
for the schema, would it be possible to incorporate an image file, or would the size be too big for the DID?
So there is a mix of concepts in here, because, for example, the schema is just like a blueprint of how the credentials will look like. So normally you don't add values in the schema. It's just like the schema will say this credential will have a name, date, whatever is the credential about. Just a reference to the properties of the credentials. Now, the DIT, normally the DIT will not contain that kind of data as well. The DIT is only an identifier. So the DIT what we'll have in some instances is a way to contact the controller of the DIT and some cryptographic keys to prove DIT ownership, or that you are the DIT controller. So there you won't be having images. It's possible to embed an image in the credential. Yeah, that's possible. The credentials, they don't live in the blockchain, so there is not much of a constraint regarding a size of the credential. Obviously, the smaller the better. If for some reason a small image is required to be added in the credential, I don't see a problem with that. You can convert an image into a string format. Basically, you encode the image in a string format, and you can put that in the credential if necessary. Other ways to do that is maybe don't add the image directly in the credential, but add like a URL that says this credential has this image that is associated. So that way you can do it, and you don't add a size to the credential. So yeah, I mean, it's possible to add images in a way or another by reference or by encoding.
So Esteban, from my reading of the DID standard, that URL would be embedded in the DID document that references the DID. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, in the DID document, the URL that normally is referred there is an endpoint. So this endpoint is to, for example, let's say I have a DID and I give my DID to you for some reason. You need to contact me. So how do you contact me? So DIDs have fields. Sometimes there are URLs that you can use as a way to contact me. So let's say I am a computer service of some sort. So let's say that the URL that goes there with my DID is an API where you can send me messages. Also, this thing doesn't need to be a URL. I mean, there are DIDs that are a little bit different. And instead of a URL, you can put there an email address, for example. So also the DIDs documents, the specification is really very open. You can get creative with that. Normally, when we talk about DIDs, we say these two things. It has an endpoint, it has a public key. That's like the more basic form, but doesn't need to be that way. I mean, you can have multiple public keys because you may have a different encryption challenges that you need to solve with your DID, or you may have different endpoints because maybe you want to provide different ways to contact the DID owner. Also, there are DIDs that don't have anything of this. Are DIDs that they are only identifiers, and they is also valid according to the specification.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask
Okay.
a follow-up question on that? Because I've been puzzled about something related to endpoints and DIDs. It's way off topic, but sparked by Esteban's really nice explanation there. How, if you have an endpoint in a DID, how do you verify? I mean, I could put any email address or website into my DID. You know, I could pretend to be somebody else or say that my website is cnn.com. Obviously, it's not. So how is the industry addressing finding the or verifying the endpoint that's referenced in the DID document?
That's a very interesting question, because the way that I see that can be addressed is, for example, I am a company and I have a DID and I put an endpoint in my DID. So as you say, it's true. Anyone can create a DID, and someone can create a copy of that DID with the endpoint. So in the end, everything needs to be solved with some sort of trust. So here is where the concept of trust registry comes into place. So you will need to have a trust registry, for example, that lists companies, and you need to trust the trust registry to be able to trust that DID. So in the end, there is always like an anchor of trust that links everything together. So let's say something at a government level. So the government has a list, a trust registry of companies that are registered with the government. So you have a DID. How do you trust if this is from company X? Well, you go to the trust registry and check it out. That's the way to do it.
This question came up for me. I don't know if anyone's played with the Kilt suite of products in the Polkadot ecosystem, but I was using their Sporon wallet and I registered my DID on chain. And then I, just for fun to see if I could do it, I put my husband's Twitter profile into my, I think into the DID document associated with the DID I registered on the Kilt chain. And nothing stopped me from doing it other than the fact that my husband was not very happy with me. But I didn't understand. I mean, so that's specifically a question for Kilt, which by the way, they have not answered, but is this being recorded? I hope this isn't being recorded. I like Kilt very much. They're a great project. I'm very supportive of them and their team. But anyway, I've been wondering about this whole concept of putting endpoints in DIDs since then.
I can. Yeah, Ruslan has a hand, and then I can answer something.
One, we have three things: DID document, and credential. DID, it is identifier. DID document is related on the web. You can, in any time, call the method of DID documents, knowing the DID and the DID methods. And credential is situation in the user wallet, not in the web. So theoretically, it means that credential and the document are different things, but the document can have method to ask user if he wants to present his credential. But it is very open. It's not standardized. It's possible, but usually it's not done. Maybe I answer the questions that the main thing that we should understand that DID document on the web and credential in our world, maybe in our mobile world. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other things to add on that question is that you own the DID document. It's yours. You can put whatever you want there. The only thing that you have to take care is that, or the other people have to take care is that the only one who can change that document is you. So whatever is written is by you. So they need to trust you because you are the one who wrote the document. Usually, a service and the endpoint is just to contact you. I think you wouldn't use the document to put a lot of information. Usually not the Twitter account. You can use it for that, but maybe it's gonna be too public. But it's something that you decide to put in the document. So as you did with your husband, you put his Twitter account and that's it. But the only statement of that document is that you put it. It's not that it's a valid Twitter, your Twitter account, it can be whatever. It's the only that it says is that you put it. And with the URL, it's usually an endpoint. So when doing this stuff on the ecosystem, someone can contact to you by that URL. So if you put another URL, it doesn't make sense because they cannot reach you. That's the main basic idea on the common functionality of the SSI DID document.
That helps. Thank you. Yes, enormously. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So now I'm going to go ask my husband who all the people who've been contacting him looking for me are.
Yeah, but you can change that, not your husband.
Yeah. No,
you have the key.
And I don't use my Kilt wallet or DID for anything. I just was
on Kilt, there's another method that is called the social credential, I think, or social KYC. That is something that Ruslan mentioned. This is not written in the DID, but in the credential. So that's different. As I think they did some authorization with the Twitter account and validate that you are the real user and put that on the credential.
Yes, exactly. I see. Now I see. Yeah. And so Kilt social KYC is a different thing than registering your DID on chain and putting your own endpoint into it. But that you clarified it for me perfectly. That makes complete sense. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks, guys. Super, super educational. Alison, when I got my hands on my first wallet, I also tried to put everyone else's details in it and see whether it said you're wrong. It had no way of knowing, right? And then when I got my hands on the second wallet, this one did a call to Home Affairs. And so I sat next to someone, I said, date of birth, and I plugged it in and plugged the person's name in, and then took a sneaky selfie of the person and plugged that in, and then got a verified identity. I was like, dodgy process. So I think once we get these tools in our hands, we start playing with it to kind of see, like, how does it work? What is actually broken based on how we understand the world works today, right? And I think these conversations definitely help us to get clearer in terms of how the technology works. And then as we get into implementing governance frameworks and trying to figure that out, would get to the point of asking a whole lot more questions to make sure we're not dealing with bots, or we're trying to make sure we have a secure ecosystem. And, you know, one of the things that the governance framework talks about is like a trust mark, right? And one of the other projects I'm working on outside of IO is actually talking about using a trust mark so that anyone in the ecosystem, because it's all actually like big corporates that are wanting to play in this ecosystem, would have this trust mark to say that they are operating within this trusted ecosystem. And there's a whole lot of governances and complex governance models and frameworks, you know, being developed to create this kind of closed, trusted ecosystem. So I think, you know, the only way we're going to know for sure how this thing works is as we start implementing these things and using it, and you know, as it starts getting real in our lives, we'll then start answering the hard questions. And so far, it's been a great journey knowing about all these great things that SSI is going to one day do for us. But now as the rubber is hitting the road, because that's where SSI is, we're like opening ourselves up to many more questions, which is great, which is why we have the space for us to come together once a week and have the conversation. But it is 9:30 on my side. Are there any more questions?
Yes. Sorry, Anushka, I know it's late for both of us, but I do have one more question unrelated. Regarding all the stuff that's going on with the Cardano testnet. So I haven't been following this closely, but I know Vassal testing prompted a major issue with the Cardano testnet. How is that impacting the Atala PRISM testnet environment?
So Lance and Esteban and team will be able to answer this
I can
fast.
jump in there. So basically, the Pioneer environment that we have been using is connected to the Cardano testnet, the original one. So with this thing that happened with Basil, basically that testnet is broken.
Catastrophically broken even?
Yep, catastrophically broken. So it's still there, but it's not very reliable. So right now there are two new testnets from Cardano. One is called Preview, and the other one is called Pre-Production. So eventually, we need to migrate our Pioneer environment to one of these testnets. The thing is that we already know that these testnets are going to be respawned in some time. So probably what we are going to do is, this is not being defined yet, but what makes more sense is to make the Pioneer environment connected with the Preview testnet, and make what right now is the pre-production Atala PRISM environment connect with the pre-production Cardano testnet. So the advantage with this is that, let's say in a few months a new hard fork comes. So the idea is that the hard fork is going to be deployed first in the preview testnet. So Pioneer environment will be used as a lab, the Prism Pioneer environment for these new changes that come with future hard forks. But since we are going to have pre-production with pre-production testnet, whatever is being developed right now by Astros or customers or whoever is using this can continue on pre-production environments. So once everything is approved and is looking good in preview, then the hard fork will move to pre-production and will stay probably for a few epochs. And after that goes to mainnet. So the idea is to have this like a waterfall that new hard forks go in this process that gives some sort of buffer for the people developing in these environments to prepare.
So I think I followed most of that. My reason for the question is we were probably going to do our Fund 10 proof of concept project that I was just referencing earlier in the conversation using the testnet. But when would the Prism Pioneer environment migrate away from the old Cardano testnet to the, I forget what the first one that you called was, the pre-production preview network.
Yeah, I don't know about that, when that will happen. I mean, I think it's not that complicated to do. One thing that is for sure is that anything that has been created so far, like deeds, credentials, and all the stuff, is going to disappear from the blockchains once we migrate, because obviously it's a completely brand new blockchain, starting with a new genesis and all. So for things that are like POCs that you need more stability, the idea is to use the Atala PRISM pre-production environment, because that one is going to be a little bit more stable. That's the idea. But keep in mind that it's going to be respond soon. I don't know when. But yeah, this hard fork stuff and this mess with the testnet has been quite a challenge to sort this out, because yeah, it basically affects all the work that is being done in these testnets.
Yeah, thank you. Well, just keep us updated, because as I understand it, at some point, the testnet we have today just won't operate anymore. There won't be any more nodes producing blocks.
Yep, that's correct. So yeah, the idea is that before that happens, we need to migrate to preview.
Yes, right. That would be the order of operations.
Okay, well, thanks
No.
for raising that, Alison. And Esteban, thanks for answering. That's definitely a conversation we'll pick up tomorrow. How is this affecting you, Alison, at the moment?
Well, it's not affecting me at all at the moment, but my strong goal is when we get into Fund 10 preparations for the proposal assessment phase, for the QA phase, and we start doing the onboarding courses, that we can issue credentials. And I had planned to use the testnet because this is a proof of concept, but I don't want to do it on the testnet 2 weeks before all of that data is going to be lost, because then we won't be able to analyze the data. So the timing becomes really important.
Okay. Okay, so I think, yeah, if you can just keep the
Actually,
communication channel.
That's not entirely true, I guess, because we could have a record that the credential was issued. Maybe we wouldn't be able to verify it if the blockchain's not. We probably would still. But anyway, ideally, we would do this on the pre-production testnet.
Okay. So I think maybe we must have a chat and just look at the timelines for different things. So give us next week to discuss this internally, and then let's set up a chat for after next week. Just to see what your timelines are and what our timelines are and how we can make sure we support you as best as possible.
Well, my timeline depends on the Catalyst timeline. So if we
Yes.
actually have voting starting September 5th, we should be on track for Fund 10.
Okay, noted. Perfect. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for the great conversation, and thanks for being such SSI stars. I wish I could give you each a star credential or something for your questions and responses today. But we'll see. Maybe I'll figure out how to use NFTs or create our own currency or something for this breakout room.
Actually, I mean, for me, in all honesty, the education I get and the advances I make in my understanding from this group is just truly amazing. I feel really, really lucky and privileged to get to learn from all of you experts. So thank you very much for helping me progress.
Welcome. Thanks. And thanks to all of you for making this space so magical. I hope you have a great day further, or a great evening, or a good sleep, because that's where I'm going now. And you
Good
too.
night. Thank you, Anushka.
We'll speak again soon. Thanks so much.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.